Judge Escobar, welcome to the platform. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for being here. And just so people know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna call her Anna. She gave me permission,
Yes.
but we know it's Judge Escobar if you ever see her. So don't be like me. I got permission. I got
Yes.
special privileges. But Judge Anna is the judge for General Sessions Court Division 3. And so we're gonna get into all of that.
Okay.
But how's life been? How's everything going?
Well, since the election in May, things have actually gotten more hectic, but it's a beautiful, wonderful hectic because I did not have opposition, which I was very blessed. And so now I can actually do the work, right?
Right.
And I think that's why I'm so hectic, because I'm actually doing the work.
Right. Well, your journey to this work is what I really want to dive into and
Okay.
explore to start this off. So, born and raised Columbia. Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Tell me about you.
Okay. So I was born in Colombia.
Okay.
I was born in, and I always have to say Colombia, South America,
South
right?
America, yeah, Columbia. True.
So I was
Not
born
Columbia, Tennessee.
Exactly. Or South Carolina, North, whatever.
You're right.
So I was born in Colombia. I was born in Bogota, but my parents were from Cali.
Oh, okay.
So every time we'd go back to Colombia, when I was a child, we'd go to Cali.
Okay.
And honestly, not until I started watching Narcos did I realize what was going on in Cali when I was going back there.
Really?
Because, we just would go and see family, so we never, were exposed to anything crazy. But now I'm
Right.
like, what were y'all thinking? But anyway, so my parents came here when I was 6 months old.
Okay.
And we moved to Nashville. First, we landed in Providence, Rhode Island, where my dad was able to do a residency there.
Okay.
And then my dad got a residency at Vanderbilt.
Wow.
And we came here, and my dad tells the story that, it was between Lubbock and Nashville. And nobody knew what Nashville was like, or, everybody in Rhode Island told him he was crazy, but he chose Nashville because the person in charge of residence at Vanderbilt happened to be a Peace Corps in Colombia and was really loved Colombian people. So
wow.
Yeah, so he was very generous.
Peace Corps comes
Yes.
Thank you, Peace Corps.
So he was very generous. It's funny how, doors open for, reasons you would never predict. But so he was very generous and warm to us, so we came to Nashville. And briefly, we moved to Colorado, where my brother was born, because my dad thought he wanted to be a professor, but he realized he wanted to practice medicine.
Okay.
So we came back, and I've been here 47 years.
Wow.
So when we were here, there were only a handful of families who spoke Spanish, who were Hispanic. And my parents quickly gravitated to them. And to this day, those people are my family. I mean, we celebrate, anniversaries, birthdays, sadly now more funerals, but weddings and all that. So that was my family. But I can go on and on if you want me to.
No, so what's interesting to me, because I think like perception-wise, right? Was it with around like the 70s when?
Yes.
So
yes.
There's a lot going on
Right.
during that time, right?
Right.
Especially in South America in general, but specifically Colombia, right?
Yes.
And so in Bogota, all those places, we all seen Narcos, right?
Right.
we all know, right? We all know what was happening during that point in time, but it just hit me like your dad is a doctor, like so during that time, like because you don't hear those stories of those professionals,
Right.
that was like dealing with that at the same time and figuring like how am I going to like finish school and how is this
Right.
affecting like my professional career, potential professional career? What can I do for my family? So what was that like for your parents
Right.
during that time and having to
Yeah.
really relocate because they knew that was the best thing to do for them?
It's so funny because now they are risk adverse, but thinking back at them as young people with a baby coming here, they knew English, but of course, you learn English in school. It's not
Right.
going to be perfect, and they just dared to do it, and it's amazing to me that they did that. And somehow I admire my mom now as an adult because as a child I didn't realize it. Like, she figured out Thanksgiving. You know,
Wow.
she figured out how, and this is all before the internet, right?
Yeah.
She figured out, like, it's turkey and cranberries and, you know, all that. Because obviously we don't have
Right.
Thanksgiving in Colombia. She figured out 4th of July, you know.
Yeah.
And in Colombia, when they were there, and when they were growing up, there was no Santa Claus. Santa Claus is American.
Right.
And Halloween is American.
Right.
But now it's in Colombia. But we would get gifts from the baby Jesus and Santa Claus. And so baby Jesus would put our gifts at the side of our bed.
Right.
And then Santa Claus gifts were under the Christmas tree. So I marvel at how they were able to kind of figure out Nashville without
Right.
the internet, without
Right.
Waze, you know.
Right.
And luckily they had a good support system with
Right.
that handful of families. Because back then hardly anyone spoke Spanish.
Yeah.
And if you spoke it, what the beautiful thing was, people weren't intimidated or frightened by it. It was more curious, like, tell
Right.
me where you're from, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And not until later has it been.
Yeah.
It makes me sad. About a month ago, my parents and I were in Franklin at Cracker Barrel, and you know how you have to wait at Cracker Barrel.
Mhm.
So we're kind of crazy family. My mom speaks in Spanish, and I was speaking to her in English. And I could tell this lady was so bothered by the fact that we were speaking Spanish in public. And it made me so sad because
Yeah.
that's not how I grew up here.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you know,
yeah.
Franklin.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That is fascinating because, you know, growing up here myself, you know, like, it's easy to be isolated, right, in your
Yes.
own community bubbles. It's the South and things like
Right.
that. And so I wonder, how did your parents, like, navigate that, especially like 70s, 80s? This is a real
Right,
interesting time
right.
for our country, right? Like post-civil rights and all
Yes.
of these things are happening. Immigrant right, all of these things are going on. So were your parents aware about what was happening in this country and how, like, racially and especially in the South, it was just different than coming from a more like homogenous country
Right.
where everybody is pretty much the same, right? But you come in here now where it's a little different.
Right. Well, I will say my grandfather's black, or was black. He passed away, and so my mother and my grandmother was white, and so my mother dealt with racial issues in Colombia. So she kind of had an eye for that,
Right.
you know. And it's funny, in the 80s, all our mail would be opened because from Colombia, because we were Escobars.
Right.
And we lived in Franklin, and we were the only ones because,
Right.
of course, you're going to move to Franklin if you're an
Right.
Escobar, right? But literally, like, this is all before the internet, like I keep saying.
Right.
But my dad would ask my grandmother to send him coffee or, you know, mixes for breads and stuff like that. And our letters and packages always were opened by the U.S. Postal Service.
Wow.
So that's kind of an interesting thing.
Right.
Yeah, which I never really thought about at the time.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it hurt them.
Right.
It's like we just want coffee.
Yeah,
you
we
know?
just want coffee. We just want our pack. We just want mail, and we just want our coffee from home. That's it. We want this good old Colombian good coffee.
Yeah.
So when did you start becoming aware that maybe I'm different? You know, I may be different from the majority of people around me, right? Especially in Franklin, right? I'm different. I'm speaking 2 languages. In this thing here in the United States, these social constructs, like, they're becoming obvious now. When did that really hit you?
Yeah, I think in high school, because I felt during that time, and luckily I don't feel that way now, but during that time I felt like I didn't fit in, you know. And one thing that I've realized older is that the Spanish I know is the Spanish my parents knew from the 60s and 70s. So
Right.
I kind of speak antiquated Spanish. I don't know any, lingo or, popular words. I speak their Spanish because they
Right.
taught me Spanish. And so within, not that there were any young Hispanic people here in Nashville, but my Spanish is a little more antiquated.
Right.
But then on the other side, with my American friends, like, my mom wouldn't let us spend the night at places, and just a kind of a different family structure,
Right.
I guess. So I'd never really felt like I fit in, but I didn't realize why until later.
Right.
And Nashville was just so, I mean, it's a blessing, I guess, in that I was always the only Hispanic student in the
Right.
classroom, but occasionally people wouldn't know what I was and would call me Indian or, things
Right.
like that, but it was never ugly, not really.
Yeah.
And so I guess I was blessed in that, ignorance is bliss kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, but the moment that it all kind of came together for me was when I went to law school.
Okay.
And I went to George Washington in Washington, D.C., and
Right.
I started meeting other students that were Hispanic. And instead of it being assimilated Hispanic, they were Hispanic. And they were like, and so I joined the Hispanic Student Association, and we'd have these parties, and there would be this wonderful music, and people
Right.
would bring food, and it was like so empowering to be like, wow, this is what I have. This is what I own.
Right.
And so then I started volunteering at this immigration clinic out there in D.C. And that's the first time I realized, hey, I can use the Spanish I know, whether antiquated or not, to help people. And that's when the light bulb went off.
Right.
And that's when I was like, okay, I can do something with this.
And so you went to Vanderbilt, which is most people go to Vanderbilt for undergrad. They tend like, oh, if I'm gonna go to law school, might as well stay at Vanderbilt. Then they have a view.
Well, I'm still on the waiting list at Vanderbilt, so any day now.
Vanderbilt, this is the issue. All right, I don't know what else Anna has to do at this point to be accepted.
Exactly. So that's the answer to your question.
You might be overqualified at this point. They say
I don't think I could get in now, but.
So, what sparked that inspiration to get into law?
Sadly, I wish I had this amazing story, but
Dad is in medicine, right? And
yeah. So the sight of blood makes me like sweat and gag. I cannot add. Okay. And so it was like, I'll go to law school, because I did. Looking back as a child, I did kind of advocate on the playground for people who were being mistreated, or I'd feel bad for people. I was looking, I was aware of people that were not being treated nicely, and I guess that translated into advocacy.
Okay.
So I went to law school, and nobody in my family, was a lawyer, and I didn't know any lawyers, and I kind of went in blind. Like I really did not know what I was doing.
Right.
And kind of like Legally Blonde, seriously. Like I had no idea you were supposed to read before you got to class. I had no idea. So I get there. And I love telling this story. Back when there were bulletin boards.
Right. Yep.
There was a flyer for the Office of the Public Defender's Office.
Okay.
Here in Nashville. And they wanted interns, preferably those who spoke Spanish.
Wow.
And, I was like, well, I'm from Nashville. I speak Spanish.
Yeah.
And I really couldn't justify staying there over the summer because of money. So I was like, I'll just give this a try. Yeah. And that's honestly when I fell in love with criminal law.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was just kind of like, Carl Dean was the public defender.
Wow.
And he recognized that the city needed native speakers or Spanish-speaking attorneys to help, because right then that's when the very start of that construction boom starts.
Okay.
And so a lot of men were coming from other countries to help with the building and the construction. And honestly, it started off where they'd get their paycheck and go get a DUI or a public intoxication. It was just blowing your weekend or your money.
Right.
And then as the population grew, things got a little more serious. But he really, I always say you should have a champion and not just a mentor. And Carl Dean's been my champion.
Wow.
And he saw ahead that this city would need people who spoke Spanish.
Yeah, but that's some good foresight, because we
Yeah,
probably
look
still
at us.
need more.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow, that's interesting. So especially going through the public defender's office, and everyone that I know I've had on here, attorneys, judges, anywhere in between, has always raved about our current public defender's office and what Martisha Johnson is doing, and the whole team and staff is over there. So shout out to them. Hopefully, I never need public defender. Nobody. I want these issues. But if you do, we got a good public defender's office here. So Vanderbilt, and I want to touch on this, but especially around diversity, because growing up in Nashville, which is crazy. Like, many of my friends, we never thought we belonged at Vanderbilt. It was like, we know it's there, but I don't think that's for us, right? And so being able to go there for undergraduate school as a Latinx woman, here in the South, going to the Harvard of the South, I know you spoke about finding your community in Rhode Island.
In DC.
In DC. But, like, did that happen at Vanderbilt, or was, like, you was just trying to figure it out?
Well, I'll be honest. I mean, I went to Vanderbilt. I applied to Vanderbilt because of that whole, Hispanic thing where you stay close to your family. It wasn't really that, that's what it was. But I did live on campus. But Vanderbilt back then was so not diverse. It was not diverse. And people who were Hispanic came from Texas.
Okay.
And there's a difference. There's Texan Hispanics who may or may not speak Spanish, and it's just different. And so that was the type of people that I guess you would consider diverse. But at that time, Judge Sheila Calloway was there with me too, and so so we weren't like close, but I knew who she was. Right. She was homecoming queen, of course, as she is everywhere, right? But she's wonderful.
Hey, Anna, remember when I was homecoming queen in Vanderbilt?
She's wonderful. She is wonderful. It has been. But no diversity. And I just marvel at how stupid we were, because the biggest protest when I was around was when they were going to change from Coke products to Pepsi products. I mean, it was just so sheltered, so in a bubble, so like Greek life, and now it's really changed. It's amazing.
Vanderbilt has been radicalized in many ways.
Yes.
Especially the students that attend there. And so you go to law school, you graduate, pass the bar, all of those things, right? What all judges do, right? Yeah. You gotta go through these foundational steps. What was that initial experience like for you? Go back to the public defender's office, right?
Yes.
So now you're working with the most oppressed, marginalized, socially, economically handicapped folks, that end up going through our criminal legal system.
I'll tell you, that is the hardest job I've ever had, is being a public defender, because there are so many times where there aren't any good options,
Right.
And in your head, if this client had money, we could do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
It was the hardest job. But at that time, Carl Dean had assembled just wonderful, wonderful people. Sheila Calloway, once again, was in my life there.
Right.
Dawn Diener, who used to be the public defender. Just wonderful people that I learned so much from. And that's, I grew up in a bubble, but I started to learn about what it's like to be unhoused and how to navigate the criminal justice system when you don't have the resources. And that I think, hopefully, it gives me a better perspective as a judge when people are asked to pay back restitutions or take classes. The first thing I say is, can you budget for this? And sometimes people don't understand what I'm trying to say is, is this a realistic thing? Are we setting you up for failure? Can I waive some costs here? Can I waive fees? Because it's not fair.
From a Hispanic Latinx lens, and this is, and I wanna like kind of pivot into like the meat of this conversation, because as a black man, I know when we talk about our criminal legal system, criminal justice system, we're talking about black and brown people. We're talking about people that look like
Yes.
you and people that
Yes.
look like me. When did you start seeing that people that look like me is having a different type of experience going through this system, whether they have committed offense, yes or no, been proven innocent
Yeah.
or guilty over offense they have been alleged to commit? Like, when did that start to seep in for you as you was making your way, through the stumping grounds of the criminal legal system in your career and your path?
Right. I think, honestly, in the world of drug cases.
Okay.
Because, the majority, and I've defended and I've prosecuted drug cases, the majority, I hate to say this, of the people that were being prosecuted or that I defended were black and brown. And then when you're brown, you have that added layer of immigration. So it has such a big consequence on your family, on your freedom, and it becomes such a bigger, more important decision. I mean, I take that back. Can we strike that part?
Yeah. No, we just talking.
Yeah. No, I mean, when you have that added component of will I get deported, it's like you have only really bad choices in the situation, and most of them you cannot get probation, and so you have to serve time and then go off to ICE jail or immigration jail to get deported, and the worst is for me was when I was a defense attorney. In Tennessee, you have to prove the source of bond of any bond over $75,000, and so of course these back then, drug cases, big drug cases, had huge bonds, and so, these people that I would defend would have a ton of family members, and one person could put in 5,000 and the other person could put in 2 or whatever. And so we'd have these source hearings, and the judges were not very sensitive or informed or racially anything. I mean, they were so mean to these family members who were, a lot of times domestic workers or people in construction, where they're not going to have these huge savings accounts or bonds and stocks that you can sell to show where this money came from, and so that kept so many people in jail, when in fact these hardworking people had legitimately earned their money legally, but the judges were just awful about 20 people coming in saying I'll put in 2,000, so that would not happen to somebody who was not black or brown.
And so I want to I had this down, so I want you to since you kind of took us through a little bit, because we know, for example, General Sessions Court.
Yes.
It can be hectic for a lot of people. Especially, it can be very chaotic, especially if you've never been, you don't know. There's no manual to say, hey, this is when you walk through the door. Before you walk through the door, where do you park? Right? Right?
It is.
And so, so it can be a lot. But that outer layer of being maybe a new American, an immigrant, language barriers, right? So can you take us through some of the barriers that someone who may be new to Nashville, new to this country, right? Their English skills are maybe novice, low intermediate at best, right? And they don't know. They just know they have to show up here to this court, to this building, and figure things out. What do those hurdles and barriers look like for us that who would just never know, and just we know we can proficiently understand and know English, which helps, right? Even though it can still be chaotic, but that extra layer of not understanding, okay, I'm here, what identification do I have or don't have, all of those things. Can you take us through that?
Yes, that's a really good question. So let's start with the language. So what makes me so mad is when people, are there in court and an officer or an attorney or prosecutor or a judge will be like, well, they speak English. They don't need an interpreter. They spoke English that night. Well, they might be able to answer their name, give their address, say what their occupation is. But when you start talking about legal concepts and you add that you're incredibly nervous, people need interpreters. And when I was practicing law, maybe 15 years ago, at first in some of these rural counties, you had to hire your own interpreter. And I remember having a jury trial in Franklin, and we're doing jury selection. Back to Franklin, and doing jury selection. And this juror asked me, "Who's paying for the interpreter?" That they did not want their taxpayer dollars going to an interpreter.
Wow.
And back then, you paid for your interpreter, so I was able to assure them that their hard-earned tax dollars were not being used for that. The second part of that is, unfortunately, and I'm seeing this in the Kurdish community now, but at first in the Hispanic community, there were many people who took advantage of their own people. So there would be notaries, which are called notarios in Latin American countries, and they have more power than our notary public. So it's almost between a lawyer and a notary public. And so they will advertise as a notary, and then people think they're hiring kind of a quasi lawyer. And sometimes they would charge more than I did.
Wow.
And so their whole thing was, I'll take you to court, I'll put you in the room you're supposed to be in, everything but negotiate and act like a lawyer. And so people get taken advantage of, and that happens a lot also in the immigration world, where the prices can be, astronomical, because people will pay for hope, right? Anyway, so you've got people taking advantage of that, and sadly this year I saw that happening in the Kurdish community, which is against the law, Then, the just legal concepts. Not every country has our justice system. So it's trying to explain to somebody there's general sessions and grand jury and then criminal court, or the difference between civil and criminal. And some countries it's not illegal to drive drunk. And in some countries, if you
that is true.
Yes, if you pay off the officer at the scene, things go a different way.
Yeah, exactly.
And so just those basic concepts are really hard. And just
I never thought of that, of like understanding like this is how these kind of things work in my home country, and I can only imagine getting pulled over here in the United States, and really not understanding like how serious it can get really quickly, especially for a brown or black person, right? Not even understanding that concept yet, and thinking like, oh yeah, like here you go.
You're like, what?
Yeah, I'm just, here you go.
Or just think about, like, sometimes I'm a rule follower, okay? But sometimes I'll forget my license at home, and I'll think, oh my gosh, I hope I don't get pulled over. I have a license, I just don't have it physically with me. But can you imagine driving with knowing you don't have a license? I can't imagine the pressure and stress that causes. And so, the legal systems are very different. And so there aren't any precise words in Spanish that you can really interpret, because that concept doesn't exist. So, we try to do the best we can. So what I have loved about being on the bench, because I will toot my horn.
Yeah, toot it. We give flowers here. We give all the flowers here.
I am the first elected Hispanic judge in Tennessee.
Yep.
Now, Governor Lee just appointed a gentleman in Knoxville about a month ago. So I'm excited for him. He is in criminal court in Knoxville. But I'm the first elected. And my hope is that when somebody comes into my courtroom, no matter what language they speak, hopefully they know they're not going to be judged by the fact that they're not, fluent in their language. And that I have the knowledge of how to use an interpreter. And that at least that part of the stress will go to one side, and then we can concentrate on, the actual case.
This is a two-parter, so I'm going to do the first one first. One, being a Latinx woman, how has that made your experience good at moments, right? You can use it to your benefit, or maybe provided you challenges that some of your counterparts may have not faced, or microaggressions and things like that.
Well, first of all, when I was young, talking about microaggressions, when I was young, people, when I'd walk into a courtroom, they always thought I was the interpreter, not the lawyer. Then, and I'm not going to name names, but
Name them, lean into it now.
Sometimes when things were press-worthy, I'd be trotted in front of the camera. And when you're young, you don't really, you're like, well, I want to keep my job. So, just.
And I want to be on cameras maybe, too.
Yeah. And so you're trotted in front of cameras to show, we're not racist, right?
Right. We're diverse.
Yes, we're diverse and we're not racist. And there was something else I was going to say. Can you say again your question?
Yeah, what was the experience as far as being a Latinx woman, and maybe good or bad, how it maybe benefited you or caused more challenges because of,
Well, and I'll tell you this. It's strange because when people think of, people often forget brown people.
Right.
I mean, and when programs are dreamed of or thought of or implemented, they forget there's a brown aspect to it.
Right.
And so that's, luckily, I can have the voice to say, whoa, wait a minute. What about this person?
Right.
And luckily, I have been around for almost 27 years to hopefully have the credibility to be like, time out.
Yeah.
But it gives me so much joy that we have so many more Spanish-speaking attorneys right now. But I will say, back to your original question, is that, I am assimilated, right? So I can sit on I would sit on the bench and be looking at my case files and stuff like that. And then I'd hear judges, try to, this is back in the early days, kind of be sarcastic or mean to people who didn't speak English.
Right.
Forgetting that I was sitting there.
Right.
And you're like, dude.
I'm here.
I'm right here.
Right.
So, I'd try to get up and smooth things. But
how does that smooth things, what does that look like?
Well,
like how does a young Anna and then maybe now a more seasoned veteran Anna, like how did you and how do you now, like, broach those situations when like, come on.
So that is a great question, because I think in the mid 90s, early 2000s, growing up as a child of the 70s, 80s, you would politely say, hey, don't forget, blah, blah, blah. Right. I think now getting to know much younger people and hearing a younger, kind of more radical philosophy, it's like, wait a minute, you have no right.
Yeah, exactly.
So because I'm from the 70s and 80s, the Anna now would be firm but polite.
Right.
And I'm not saying that being firm and affirmative and purposeful is not polite.
Right.
But that goes back to the concept of wanting people who are Caucasian to feel comfortable.
Right. Exactly.
In their mistake.
Right.
Or their misconception.
Right.
And I think we're moving away from that as a society, right?
Right.
We don't want to make it comfortable anymore.
Exactly.
So, but I grew up in the South,
right,
when it was really Nashvillians,
right,
and everybody's polite and says hello, and like,
and
you try to make everyone feel comfortable, and so you would say something politely. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It makes sense. How, as you ascended through the legal system, and now being a judge, how did you see your dynamic with community like change in any way? Because now you're a judge, and things can be a little different, and how people may interact or want to interact with you. What did that look like for you in the Latinx community here in Nashville?
Well, first of all, I will say that now I'm incredibly funny. Anytime I tell a joke, a whole courtroom starts laughing when I really am not that funny, right? But it has been a beautiful, beautiful response. There's a lot of pride, and I try to be available to all immigrants. I mean, I try to go to Turk events and Conexión Americas, and as much as I can, because I hope to be a role model to young men and women that they can do what I did, and I owe them. Being an immigrant is a gift to me. It's not a burden, and I owe that community to be a spokesperson and to do the best I can and to represent well. And I think the immigrant mentality has always been, you got to work twice as hard. And women also have that mentality. You got to work twice as hard to get half the credit. And so, I don't want to embarrass or ever make them disappointed, because I feel like it's an honor. But I will say one wonderful thing. 20 years ago, we tried to start a Hispanic Bar Association, and it was just like 6 of us, so it didn't really work. But in 2018, I got together with some other young people, and we put it together. And now we have meetings where there are 30 people showing up who speak Spanish or are native speakers. And it is so beautiful to me, so gratifying to me to see how it's grown. And I hope it continues to grow.
I want you to, because I want to get into some nuanced things, right?
Okay.
Because I want to make sure in this conversation that we really dedicate time to the unique experiences that our Latinx community members have that are different than our Black community members or white community members or Asian community members, but primarily Black, because we're often compared to a lot when it comes to the treatment of the criminal legal system. What are some differences, right, that that the Latinx community may go through when trying to navigate the criminal legal system that Black Americans may not go through? And I say Black Americans because we know there are darker skinned Latinx community members as well. Yes. If people did not know that, if you didn't know, but and so
like I said, my grandfather is Black, or was Black. He passed away.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what are some of those niche things that it's just going to be different? It's just going to be different, but they're maybe not talked about a lot of times because we're often just grouped in together to share the same experience.
Right. I guess the biggest thing for me, as we've discussed, is the immigration piece to it, because that adds a whole nother layer of another legal system that is not in your favor.
Right.
So there's that. Then there's...
so you're talking about fears, like those fears of just...
Because remember, immigration jail, there's not those protections to be treated humanely. And some of the stories, I mean, do you remember those children that were in those horrible camps?
Exactly.
So, you don't have that protection of cruel and unusual punishment,
So if I have those fears, what are some of the tactics that you ever seen being used or known to be used either by police officers, other attorneys that try to use that to their advantage to get our Latinx community members to self-incriminate or take a deal they don't want to take? What does that look like, and what are some scenarios where those fears may encourage someone to do something that's really not in their best interest?
So first I'll say, when I was team leader of the domestic violence unit for the DA's office here, I would see it all the time where defense lawyers, the way it kind of works is defense lawyers often know about a case before DAs know it. Okay. So they have time to investigate and talk to people. And so I would see these defense attorneys get to the complaining witness / victim and be like, do you really want to prosecute? Are you sure you want to prosecute? And he's going to get deported. And then what are you going to do? All his mom's like in El Salvador, who needs her check or needs part. So they're that guilt factor. So then they're less likely to show up to court if they've gotten that guilt. Right. The other thing is, and unfortunately I see this sometimes, is that when you're pleading somebody to a criminal case, you have to really watch what you're doing technically on the paperwork, because, for instance, I don't know if you've heard of the law 4035-313. It's a expungible probation that all Tennesseans have. So we, other than murder, a lot of us have one free bite at the apple, you know, where we can, if you complete probation, you can get it expunged and it's like it never happened. But with people that are undocumented, immigration considers that a plea of guilt. Because that Tennessee law is not a federal law. It is a Tennessee fiction. And so, unfortunately, there are lawyers committing malpractice, thinking they're doing something good. And their client really, So that's another nuance, is those technical pieces of what a plea. And sometimes people will take pleas thinking that it'll help them with immigration when they may not have been necessarily guilty, but to try to
avoid you know, other serious things that they don't really want to deal with as far as systems. That's a lot. That's a lot. So now in the Latinx community, are you seeing more? Well, this is kind of segue into what I know you do, but do you see more of that criminal legal education happening between the community, especially when they arrive? They have this a lot huger community than when you came, when your family came, right? And so what is that like power building look like now compared to before, and how are you seeing that kind of, you know, help when they do, you know, get pulled over for something or whatever and have to show up?
Well, I will say one thing that people need to remember is that when you say Latin, that means people from Spain, people from Puerto Rico's. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've tried to explain to DAs and judges. Puerto Rico is actually a state in the United States.
It actually is,
But so it's a very big net, and they don't get along. Like some countries have these natural prejudices against other countries. So that's a whole other thing. The Spanish is different. A word in Colombian Spanish may be an insult in another another Hispanic country. So there are a lot of differences, and I think that's and so I think it's going to be our second and third generations that'll kind of be able to really get empowered together, because there's so much like fractions and things. But to your point, the public defender's office here in Nashville is doing a great job of educating people about their rights, and they have hired somebody, or they had hired, I don't know if this position still exists, somebody who consults not just on the criminal case but on the immigration case. Because that is a very much needed piece. And so when I see things that aren't really great for clients, it's usually non-public defenders doing it. When I was in private practice, I always made people hire me and an immigration lawyer so that I wouldn't mess them up, you know, not knowing. Because that's a big responsibility to change the course of a family.
A huge responsibility. Being a judge, you know, you get to see a lot, you know, a lot of cases, a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different situations. Being in this field for a good amount of time now, what is your thoughts or even definition on like justice? Like, what does that mean to you as a person, as a human being living and breathing? But and what does that mean to you and look like as a judge as well, that has to, you know, be bipartisan and look at everything in totality?
Well, I feel I'm very lucky that I had both sides, because I can appreciate the pros and cons of both sides. As a defense attorney / public defender, I would, you know, people will say, how can you do that? How can you defend people? But really, it's all about what can they prove. I could care less if you did it or didn't do it. I will never ask you that. Let's look at what they can prove. So is that justice? I don't know. I mean, but that's one portion of it. For prosecutors, and you know, I've been immersed in domestic violence for the last 6 years. So that's kind of my lens right now. Is there justice? I mean,
Right.
I am very vocal that I think we need to really fix these classes that we send people that are accused of of domestic violence. We need to fix these classes because right now they're called batterer intervention classes, and it's 26 weeks, and private companies are making a bundle off of people, and I don't think it gets to the core. A lot of people have PTSD, the ACEs, they've seen so much as children that they're yes, they need therapy.
Right.
Not some workbook about like my tools if I get mad.
Right.
If we really want to fix this, we really should be doing that. And so, for justice, I mean,
it's a loaded word.
Yeah, domestic violence victim.
Right.
They still love that person, and they're still going to live with that person. And what I try to tell people is, hey, we're all going to fight, but we want you to do it in a safe and healthy way where your children can see how you do it, and so that they know how to fight safely and healthy, so that they don't become a victim or a perpetrator. So, but is there justice? I don't
Yeah, I don't know if we. Many would say I don't know if we ever witnessed that, especially as black and brown folks in this country. I don't know if we know what that looks like really.
I mean, this week I had a case where these families have been going. I mean, I've known of them for the last 3 or 4 years, going back and forth because, this family killed somebody from their family, and that family killed somebody from their family. I mean, when is that going to stop? What is that? That's not. What are we doing?
Yeah,
it's not
exactly.
justice. I mean, everybody's going to jail. Is that justice?
Right.
I mean,
that doesn't seem to work. Doesn't seem to stop things from happening. Okay, so I have to bring this up now.
Okay.
So you didn't lead it into this because talk about resources, right? And like what is really happening with that? And a lot of people, I think, or forget that judges, you all don't make laws.
No,
you all
stuck with
laws. You're stuck with the statutes and things that are in place, and have your wiggle rooms here and there, and can figure out some stuff. How do you use? Because I think again, judges have very specific perspectives. Because you all see the things that are actually happening. How do you use that perspective and that power that you have to maybe advocate or push for things that will prevent people from having to show up in front of you in court? I know.
Well, so being a judge actually takes away your voice. We are under the Board of Judicial Conduct, so we're not supposed to really advocate for things. We're not supposed to endorse candidates, and I think people need to know that, because then they get frustrated with us because I helped elect you and now you won't do anything.
Expectations are realistic.
But we can't. We cannot, because we're supposed to be neutral.
Right.
And definitely give the appearance of neutrality. So anyway. So
it's like, how do you knowing that, how because judges are 8-year term. This is a long time, and I know it's a slippery slope for you all. So how do you balance that? How do you say, I know if the city or if our federal government provided or subsidized these resources here, that these individuals won't end up where they have to be in front of me.
So I'll tell you what. So we have the administrative office of the courts, which is actually just down the street from you, and we also have our judicial conference has a lobbyist, and so we can go through those two organizations to kind of suggest legislation or help educate legislators about the impact of different legislation.
Right. How does that work out?
Well, unfortunately, because the whole state,
there
are 200 and something judges. It's only a handful that get really heard.
Right.
But it. For instance, in my other passion is treatment courts, right? because you see how people's lives can be changed, and when it's could be negatively affected under a traditional type of court. But the treatment courts have really advocated for themselves in front of this legislature, this conservative legislature, and this legislature has funded many projects with Veterans Court, Mental Health Court. Judge Melissa Blackburn just got a law passed that would fund her courts, or fund the mental health court throughout the state. So there is an ability, I guess, to answer your question, to advocate
You got to be
for
big.
maybe concepts, but not like, murder should be an A misdemeanor. You can't do that.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, so.
Yeah, and it's just, because I think I think I was one of those people for a long time. It's like, man, judges have all this, they should be. And once you understand that, you can have realistic expectations for judges or any kind of elected position in our city. That was like, okay, like these are their parameters. What they have to kind of, the wiggle room they have to operate in. So
it's hard because you have to be, like, you have to, the rules of ethics kind of are overarching, and you have to be neutral, and you do need to be polite. And honestly, like on my dockets, 80% of the things that happen are because the DA has made a decision. And so where I step in is if it's like, whoa, is this a realistic thing? Or, is this too high? Is this too low? But I don't have power over every single case. And then when it comes to hearings, my big job is to be the referee, really, to make sure everybody gets heard and it's fair and we're following the rules of evidence.
What's the most challenging part of being a judge for you?
It is probation violations, because I see so many people with mental health issues and addiction issues, and it is frightening. It is so frightening, especially with fentanyl. The number of overdoses in this city is a quietly kept secret that should be another topic for you, seriously, because it's awful. People are losing their lives over this fentanyl.
And how does that intersect with, I'm a new American? I don't speak I'm not a proficient English speaker. How do those things?
It's a nightmare because, like, a lot of this is just me generalizing of what I see. A lot of individuals who have come from Africa have come with tremendous PTSD from just what they have experienced in their country, and they come here and their mental health is just not great. And trying to find a psychiatrist or MTMHI or some entity that can speak that person's language and give a diagnosis and do an evaluation is really hard. And it's it's just horrible things that these people have seen in their countries and are here. Same thing with recovery communities. I don't think there are any interpreters or Spanish-speaking people there. The best we have is a Spanish-speaking class for batterers intervention. And I think the DUI school, or the alcohol safety class is what they call it now. They have a Spanish speaker, but trying to get mental health and like true inpatient addiction stuff is just not available.
Yeah, and that's, I think a lot of that too is around that, like, language justice, that I know a lot of organizations are working on, like workers' dignity is like one of them.
Absolutely, yeah.
For sure, and really pushing that and understanding, like, the layer of language and how that can make or break a situation, or just make things more complex. And just a short, like, this is a short story. My car got hit, and this is a really special situation. My car got hit by a guy who's just moved here from Guatemala, and I just happened to speak Spanish,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
So this, and it was still difficult because I think the Spanish that we spoke was more of an indigenous kind of, so
yes,
it was kind of,
that was another point I was going to make to you. Yes.
And so that was the whole thing,
Yes.
right? And being informed and understanding, like, okay,
Yeah.
like the whole concept of insurance was different. All
Yeah.
of these things is like, okay. And I was like, let me call Jorge Salas Diaz.
Yeah.
Let me call. He's in law school now, Vanderbilt, matter of fact. And he helped me like kind of like figure out like the best way to navigate that situation, and it worked out fine.
Okay.
But it's like those type of
Yeah.
things I'm pretty sure happen more times than often, in being aware and being like compassionate,
Right.
but also knowing like what could be the repercussions of going through the typical normal protocol that
Right.
one would typically go through. Call the police, out of the
Right.
like what could happen or not happen, right?
Yeah.
And so
Well,
just being aware of those
You've
things.
got cultural competency,
Yeah.
right? So now in Nashville, we're seeing people who have those indigenous languages, and that, and to describe that, I guess it's like those Mayan, like indigenous. It's not Spanish,
Right, it's not Spanish.
And so then unfortunately, I've seen some judges get frustrated, like people speak Spanish, but it's their second language. It's not their first language, and finding these like Chew and I can't think of the other ones. Trying to find these interpreters, we're having to use the language line.
Right.
And I don't know if you're
I'm not familiar with a language line. Yeah.
So the language line is a national thing. So you could be calling somebody. You call the language line. You tell them what language you need. It's of course incredibly expensive. That the government has to pay for. I think some languages are like $300 an hour with a 2-hour minimum or something like that.
Wow.
And so this person could be in California interpreting, but interpreting is a profession and a gift, and some people are not great at it.
Yeah, don't ask me to interpret anything in Spanish. Nothing.
It's a gift. I mean, you have to know how to do it.
Right.
And so people just assume, well, if just let's do this in Spanish, but that's a second language, and they may not be able to read in Spanish. And so that's happening right now, that people are not really, don't want to take the time to figure this out.
Right. What does that look like figured out? Like, what if you had your dream budget of like, okay, we're just gonna pour all of these things in order to serve this particular group of people because like this, not that. What would that look like?
Well, it would be training for the people who weren't that people.
Start there. We need to train the people that are not affected first. Get them up to speed.
Yeah, and I love the fact that we're talking about discrimination and racial relations, but once again, the brown aspect of that is not being really talked about.
Yeah.
And when offices are doing that DEI work.
Yeah.
And they're not remembering the entire DEI population. And then to me, the biggest part is inclusion.
Right.
It's great to be diverse.
So let's dig into that. What is that? What did those conversations sound like? Right. Because I can see how, again, like they tend to group black and brown together with like realistically probably more emphasis on black, right, in this country, right? So what are those conversations, and then what could possibly black folks do to make sure, like, hey, well, like, how can we be allies in that, understanding that, thank you, but like we need to also remember the brown aspect of that in these things.
Well, it's so funny. I attended a DEI workshop at one of the places I worked at, and I remember the three of us who were brown were like, what about us? Because I forgot, it was some weird exercise where like the white people were on one side and the black people were on the other side, and then we're just like, here we are.
Wow.
And so, it sounds bad, but it was an exercise that made sense at the time. I can't.
But I think
remember.
that's something to bring up, though, for people to be like more conscious and aware about. Yeah, even black folks.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, And people who are Hispanic can be white,
Right.
with blue eyes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the typical beautiful Colombian woman is white with green eyes.
Mm.
And so it's such a different, it's a
Yes, array of, yeah.
yeah. So it's hard to say this or that,
Right.
but it's frustrating because people in businesses don't. I guess it's almost like you need to wait your time.
Right.
Like we're focusing on this, and then we'll get to
Right.
y'all.
Right.
And it is, I guess, I don't know. That's hard.
It's complex.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
And then the inclusion part, I think, is critical. Like with our Muslim brothers and sisters, our friends.
Mhm.
You know, you can be diverse with a Muslim community, but are you going to invite them to lunch? Are you going to invite them
Right.
to your home? Are you going to go
Right.
to their mosque? I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why we do this,
Mhm.
right? I think that's why, like, talking about it and calling it out,
Yeah.
because somebody makes. I think a lot of it sometimes is unintentional.
Yes.
You
No.
know,
No.
I
You,
think- I
you-
think-
it's comfort.
yeah, it's
like
comfort,
with who you
yeah.
know, and you have your inside jokes,
Yeah.
and
But
you
then,
get
like,
each other.
well, once
Yeah.
you hear it out loud, you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I did not think
Right.
about. Maybe I can, So hopefully somebody listening and watching this can take the next step in their DIE, whatever,
Yeah.
all that training, and take the next step.
Just ask
Yeah,
someone
yeah,
to lunch.
Yeah, just ask someone to lunch. Yeah, just ask someone to lunch. Just ask someone to lunch. I want to go into the My City Academy.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
And really dig in that what you co-founded. And like that kind of brings home everything that like I think that we talked about, and really working with new Americans so they can really understand like government
Yes.
and like the legal like okay, you're here now. It's a little different maybe than home.
Right.
Let us embrace you in a brave and civil space, non-judgmental. Like what does that look like? What happens there? And also like how do people are made aware that how can they sign up,
Okay.
or what's that process?
Well, this topic makes me super happy, so I'm glad you brought it up. So let me give you a little history. When I was Metro Clerk, I was Metro Clerk for 2 years, which is Clerk of the Council. And once again, my champion, Carl Dean, got me appointed to that.
Okay. Carl Dean, we got to get you on
yes.
here. We got to get Carl Dean on here.
He's the best. So it's an unusual role because you're appointed by the mayor, but you're confirmed by the council. So you work for the council, but you still have input with the mayor and work with the mayor. And so at that time, you're kind of like the manager of the council chambers. And so I kept seeing, people from Leadership Nashville and Leadership Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, and all these, 50 Forward, all these groups coming in and having these government days. And, to get into Leadership Nashville, it's a pretty big deal. You have to be invited, and then you have to be selected.
Yeah.
Exactly. And one day I was like, that is just so unfair. Like these people are getting to meet the movers and shakers of the city because they know somebody or they do something important. But what about the everyday citizen? So that's kind of how that started. And so I literally went down to Mayor Dean's office and was like, I have an idea. And what if we did this for, new Americans, but made it about Metro government so that they could learn about Metro government? And he's got a wonderful way of being a leader. He doesn't micromanage. And then if you have an idea, he won't take credit for it, but he will encourage you. If it's successful, he won't take credit for it, and he will always give you credit, but it will just be behind you all the way. And so I was like, what if we just give this a try? And I literally was sketched out.
Right.
I really didn't know what I was doing. And he's like, sure, go for it. And we had no budget. So, but I have
the best things start off with no budget.
Yes. So, Aaron Williams and Billy Fields from the Office of Neighborhoods worked with me on this. And so what we did is we came up with 6 months. Once a month, you'd come for a day.
Okay.
We had a public safety day. I forgot what else. Education, government. I forgot where, the water department and all that. I forgot what we called that. But each day you would learn and you'd go to these departments. And my absolute favorite tour, believe it or not, of Metro is the water plant.
Okay.
Omohundra is gorgeous. And when you hear them explain how water is purified here, it's amazing.
I'm going to have to take that tour. I need to know about that.
I am such a geek about the water
That
department.
Cumberland Punch, as my dad used to. Want some Cumberland Punch? What's that? Yeah, the water. Yeah.
Well, Omohundra, when we had the flood, was the only one that was functioning, and it was the oldest. So it's crazy and it's beautiful. But I'll never forget. Like, we go down there as a group in our donated bus, and and this lady had never bought water in Nashville because in her country you can't drink the water, right? You buy bottled water, and she's been spending all this money on bottled water. So this just longtime water department employee like gets her a glass of water, and she drinks it, and she says, "Oh, that's really good." This water department employee started crying. I know that's silly, but in the moment it was just beautiful how he convinced this lady who had never probably drank non-bottled water forever to save money and drink out of our water.
And they just shed a tear.
And they shed a tear, and we took pictures of her like going around. It was just beautiful. But so, same thing with, the police, the sheriff, all these different leaders would come down, and they'd get the handouts, and this is who you contact if you need this or that. They were educated on stormwater because who knew you can't really pour things down the stormwater drains and like codes. This was before there was the chicken legislation. Like, people were having chickens, you can't do that. You need to blah, blah, blah. So the beautiful thing that I did not anticipate was that as these people were learning, these participants were learning about Metro was learning about them. So they'd ask a question, and then the director would be like, "Wow, we hadn't thought of that. Let's keep talking about this." And they networked within their group, and I do this, I do that. Let's network. So that was just beautiful. And in the long run, they started serving on boards.
Wow.
Because they became acquainted with Metro.
Yeah.
And they felt comfortable. And they had met Metro. And so the beautiful thing was seeing them being appointed to boards. Because to me, as you know, knowledge is power.
Exactly.
And if you can take that back to your community and say, hey, this is how you get your trash picked up, or, this is who you would call for that. Because it could be very frustrating.
Yeah.
Especially like if you're asking Metro to solve a federal issue, or the feds to solve a Metro issue, you're going to be really frustrated. And Metro employees are good people. I mean, for the most part, they want to do a good job. They love this city. So it's a beautiful thing. And so it's been around for 10 years now. And
wow, that's amazing.
Every mayor that we've had, and we've had a lot of mayors, haven't we?
last couple years,
They've kept it.
Right.
And I hope and pray, and I will advocate for the next mayor, if it's not, whichever mayor it is.
You're not ready to get into those weeds yet.
No. Whoever is the winner, I will keep advocating for it to stay, because I think it helps everybody.
Right. Yeah.
And then we had the first graduation at the Parthenon in front of Athena.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to an event there, but it's just beautiful and so impressive, and like they felt special.
No, that's amazing.
Once again, our reception was bring a dish from your native land, because we had no money.
No budget, so therefore bring your own drink, dish, potluck.
It was a potluck, but it was the best. And I still get people who are like, "Hey, I was in this class or that class, and it was really cool." So
no, that's amazing, and like that's community, right? That's just community, and that's you recognizing like we're missing something. There's some blind spots, and bringing people and giving people opportunity to learn and connect, right? And networking, and who knows whatever like came out of those things, right? And people meet. Who knows, right? Who knows? And so like, thank you.
Well,
and Carl Dean for believing in you. and be able to start that initiative.
And that's why the name My City.
Yeah.
It's not because, us that have felt as
Right.
outsiders. I
Exactly.
want them to feel this is my city.
Right.
And Aaron and Billy did so much, and it's a beautiful thing. And I will say that it was in a white paper at the Obama White House. So
throw it out there. Hey,
Yeah.
toot your own horn. This is what this is about.
But no, it's a beautiful thing to understand each other, right?
Yeah.
To spend a day with somebody from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And,
Be more intentional
Yeah.
about that.
Mhm.
That's what we should all be doing.
yeah.
Another 8 years coming up for you.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Nashville's gonna look a lot different
Yes.
in 8 years
It
if
is.
we continue building like we're building. But what does that mean, like for General Sessions Court? What does that mean from a criminal legal system for our Latinx community, right? What does that mean, and what role do you want to play in that?
Well, that's a big question. I'm excited about our new crew of judges.
Yep.
Because there are 11 of us, and so I think because of COVID, we've become much more open to technology, and so I don't see. I hope there's not a world where we stop meeting in person totally, but for convenience sake, there are times when you need to have Zooms and that kind of thing and be more open to technology in the courtroom. So that's going to be exciting. I think we'll keep expanding on that and make it more consumer friendly. And you'll be able to access things more online. And I'm just really proud of our city governments are hiring more and more Latinx employees who can provide customer service or representation advocacy for Latinx people.
Right.
So that's exciting. But then we're going to have to figure out the same exact thing for our Kurdish brothers and sisters and the Egyptians.
The vast,
yes,
like very multicultural community that we have now.
Right, and it's beautiful. But they're where we were with Spanish like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
As for me, I really, I run I'm the presiding judge for a treatment court for human trafficking survivors who are involved in the criminal justice system. And I am learning about addiction and mental health and human trafficking, obviously, and trauma and all that. And I think if we as judges start learning more about addiction, so many of the things that we see will start to make a little more sense. Because people, I really genuinely still believe in people. But sometimes mental health and addiction just takes them down a path they never wanted to go. And I hope that we become more centered on that.
Yeah, and if we do, that means like you all have more resources available. When those individuals come in front of you all, you can identify it and say, okay, well, we have these programs, we have these resources, that hopefully are free, right?
Yes.
At no cost.
Right.
And let's try this before, we throw you in jail, or whatever, that, or have to even put you on probation or anything. Let's try something else.
I was so ignorant about addiction when I, was a younger attorney because I thought if you went to rehab, it'd be fine. You're done. You're cured. Boy, it is when you walk along with somebody who's in the throes of that, you are humbled. They are strong people. They are.
Yeah, our proximity to it, I think determines that understanding, right? Because it's easy, like, and a lot of it's probably based off our own ego and what we've done. So it's like, oh, I could stop if I could, like, and if you've never been through it, if you don't know it, like, you don't. It's serious.
Yes,
it's serious. Yeah, and how it affects people's behavior and what they do or don't do. Like people, they just not themselves, right? And so,
and that just trickles down to family and children.
Yeah,
and
affects a lot of people.
Yeah,
affects a lot of people.
It's just sad.
Yeah.
So I hope to keep learning, and I hope that our criminal justice system keeps learning about that and being more aware of that. I will say the sheriff's department started the behavioral care center. Have you heard about that?
I have.
that is a phenomenal program that hopefully will divert people from prosecution.
Yeah. I think that's like the point is, you know, how do we not jail mental health, right? I think that's the thing. And how do, you know, and I think we exploring some stuff, even with like the MNPD and the pilot that they have with mental health responses and things like that. And, you know, and not having to respond to everything with police.
Correct.
Right. And I think that's, you know, I don't know where they are in the pilot program now, but like, you know, we have to start somewhere, you know, and having some program is better than no program to kind of figure out, okay, can we, this police has to show up at all? Can this mental health handle these type of things? And so,
what I've learned in my old age is if you call something a pilot, people are willing to try it. But if you,
okay, that's fine.
Okay, let's try it.
Let's try it. Okay, all right. I want to give you the last word, Anna.
Okay.
Like, this has been very. I want to do this again.
Oh, I'd love to.
Yeah, because I just think like there's so much that we can dive even more into. We'll be here for 5 hours, just talking about these things. But I want to give you the last word to just leave with us, with the people. Just something that's on your heart, or just think things that people may consider, even if it's even something specific to the Latinx community.
Okay. Well, once again, it has been a joy to be here with you because it's so easy to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a wonderful conversation. I'm having a good time. The biggest thing I say is, first of all, I would never dreamed that I would be a judge. And I never dreamed that I would campaign. I'm actually an introvert and I'm actually shy. And so it's hard for me to do that. And I've just been very blessed to be able to figure that out. But because of that, I say that people should do things that make you feel uncomfortable. Because you will get the best rewards. I mean, for me, public speaking and being out there is uncomfortable, but I have met wonderful people like today. And the great thing about campaigning is you get to know parts of Nashville that you may not necessarily know. And I always say that there are people in Nashville that are quietly doing really good things in their neighborhoods that we'll never know. You will never know. Right. And there are good people out there. So make yourself get out of your comfort zone. The other thing is to be engaged. If you're not happy with something at work or in the city, speak up. Speak up. I mean, you don't have to, run a protest or, do something formal. If you just speak up, so many times people are like, oh, we didn't realize this was having that effect. Oh, we'll change it, So be brave enough to speak out and not, why be miserable for no reason? Right. And for the Latinx community, si se puede, right?
Always.
You just work hard. And in law, all you have is your word, because we don't sell products, right? All you have is your reputation and your word. So if you work hard and you keep your word and you're honest and, try to be the best person you can be, I think you can do anything. And like I said, find a champion. If I hadn't had those champions early on, I don't know where I'd be, because they opened doors. They put me in situations where I could grow, and it was totally selfless. So find those selfless people that want to help you be your best self.
Judge Anna Escobar, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I can't wait to do it again.
Yes, we'll do it again.
All right, sounds good.